Hi again, welcome to 2011 Studies. Let's recap what the past studies have been about, and then we're going to get into something very interesting that may relate to 2022 and 2026. Now, we've looked at how hypocrisy that existed during Jesus' ministry will be present in our time and during the 1335 days. We have looked at how the number 15 can represent resurrection. Both studies I'll link in the description below, and I'll also put a 1335 study there. I don't know which one to put up, though we've done a lot of them on it. But one thing about the YouTube ads is if you want to avoid those, use Brave, the Brave browser, and I'll put a link to that also in the description. It's a free download. I use it. I was using something else, and these ads were coming up, and they were just so long, and they also seem, just super, I don't know, unprofessional. They're just ads about anything. So anyway, use Brave if you want to avoid the ads. And if you ever come across your computer when you're watching a video doing the little circle, adjust your clock. I just learned this yesterday. Adjust your clock to sync up to the right proper time. Mine was off like 3 hours for some reason. Anyway, we've looked at the 1335 days of Daniel 12 as being very literal days, and only certain years do qualify. We've looked at those years, and I'll try to post this again in this study for those who have not heard this yet. This is very significant. The more I think about it, you have a verse in Daniel 12, and it talks about 1290 days, then it talks about 1335 days. Well, at one time I was thinking, okay, it's the 1290, and then you wait 45 days and it comes to 1335. I don't think that's the case. I think there's the 1290 first, and then there's the days of 1335. Blessed is he, the verse says, Daniel 12:12, blessed is he that waits and comes to the 1305 and 30 days. The ISA reads it, happy is he who waits, or blessed is he who waits and comes to the days of 1335. And then in Daniel 12:13 it says, but go thy way till the end be, he's speaking about to Daniel, for thou shalt rest and stand in thy lot or inheritance at the end of the days. And now the way we know this is not talking about, well, let me put it this way. The 1335 days was the duration of Christ's ministry from 29 AD to 33 AD, from trumpets to Pentecost. That was the original pattern. We're using that same identical pattern and going from trumpets in 1 year, and it's a span of 3.5 years, and then we go to trumpets to Pentecost in the other year. So it's a group of years from trumpets to Pentecost. Some come out 1334 days, as in the case of 2014 to 2018. Some come out to 1365 days, as in the case of the last study we did, which was all about the year 2036. From 2032 to 2036, it's 1365 days, trumpets to Pentecost. So that didn't qualify. We eliminated 2036, and we'll eliminate more years as we go, just one by one, just to see which years that we've passed some already, but which years from this point on. And it looks like 2022 to 2026 is very, very significant. The more I look at it and the more I study online, it seems very significant. So, like I say, there's a separation of days. The 1290 comes first, and with everything going on in this world, that would not surprise me that we're in that time now. And then we get to the happy he who waits and comes to the 13th days of 1335, which could be, this is September 2021. We have a full cycle, a full year cycle until we reach September that's trumpets of 2022. So that's the 12-month cycle until we reach that time of a possible start of the 1335 days. And then it'll go to 2026, Pentecost, and then it's followed by the 1335 comes first, and then it's followed by a 10th, or 133.5 days. So that's like a 10th of 1335, and that's a 4-month period. May relate to the 4 months till harvest that Christ spoke about, but it also may relate to God's short work, Him performing His short work. And if there's ever a time in anybody's life that's listening to this, for you to cry out to Christ and ask for salvation and forgiveness, now is the time. You know, I think we're really counting down this important time frame. Now, what we're going to look at today, after we've reviewed 1335, done elimination years and so on, we're going to look at the 1600 furlongs. This was sent to me this past week. I looked at it, I prayed about it, and it is possible that this is talking about the same time reference as the 1335, except it starts earlier, in other words. But it ends Tabernacles. It ends on the last day of Tabernacles. And just like we're talking about the 133.5 days ending on Tabernacles, the last day of Tabernacles. And since that's the last day and mentioned in the Bible, I think that is the day of a day of resurrection. You can call it a rapture if you want, but it's a day of resurrection and Christ's return. So the 1600 furlongs of Revelation. The study of Revelation is very difficult. It's very difficult because you're trying to look at what John saw. He saw these visions. He saw these examples of something that we're supposed to, read and hopefully interpret by studying God's Word, comparing verse with verse. But it's difficult. It really is. And sometimes God will use like a distance. Sometimes He'll use a day for a year. He'll substitute things. And in this kind of a study, it's almost like, okay, this is a possibility. Let's wait and see what happens. Let's wait and see if some things start to happen in September of next year, around the 25th, 26th, around that time. I always give a one-day variation either way, but it's September of trumpets next year could be the start of the 1335 days. And if you're discouraged about everything that's going on in this world, it would be an amazing thing. Blessed is he who waits and comes to the days of 1335. So now let me go over this the best I can, and I'll tie it into the 1335 days. Now, from the 17th day of the second month, AD 2022, to the last day of Tabernacles, or 2122 Tishri, AD 26, at the last day of Tabernacles in 2026, it's 1600 days. So why is the 17th day of the second month in 2022 important? Because biblically speaking, that is the same phrase that started the flood. That had to do everything with the flood. And I really hope I put the verses in here to talk about that. Yeah, I did. Okay, Genesis. So what we have is we have two time periods, but they interlap. You have the 1335 days, trumpets to Pentecost, trumpets next year, 2022, to Pentecost 2026, that's 1335 days. And then you have the 1600 possibility of days. And it's 4 years, 4 months, 16 days, including the end date, or it's 52 months, 16 days. Now, I looked at that 52 months, and I started thinking that's pretty interesting because Jeremiah built the wall, and it was completed in 52 days. Now, this is 52 months, but the fact that 1600 days is 52 months, that might be significant. So we have to sort of, just like I say, wait and see what happens during this time frame of 2022 to 2026. So let's recap this. It's the 70th day of the second month in 2022 to the last day of Tabernacles, Tishri 2122 AD 2026, 1600 days. What was the biblical account for the 17th day of the second month? The judgment of the flood began. Now, if you're familiar, I'm sure, with the 1600 furlongs in the book of Revelation. People who study the Bible know about this. And it's a time of judgment. There's no doubt about that. The language is there. But this is Genesis 7:10. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Some of this language, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, that's very fascinating, because if we're looking at a 1600 day period of judgment, it may also very, very well be that the windows of heaven, that phrase, means a lot of salvation is going to happen during that time too. I just saw this. I didn't really pay attention to this before, but yeah, the windows of heaven. I'll try to post the other verse that relates to the windows of heaven being a blessing. In this case, it was a judgment, but God's mercy is incredible. Okay, so in other words, if there's literal day fulfillment of the 1600 furlongs being days, the judgment or hour of his judgment could begin in our time at the equivalent of the 17th day of the second month, and that's our May 18th of 2022. And the finish of the 1600 days on the last day of Tabernacles in 2026. So you have 1600 days from May 18th, 2022 to the last day of Tabernacles in 2026. Now the 1335 days, that's in there. It's from September of 2022 and ends the last day of Tabernacles 2026. They both have the same end date, Tabernacles. Now let's look at the opening of Revelation 14, the language of salvation within the hour of judgment. Revelation 14:6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters. Let me repeat that. Saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters. All those other phrases there, heaven and earth, the sea, are explainable. But when you come to fountains of waters, I believe, really, that this is talking about salvation. And I'll show you why. The fountains of waters really can be defined as salvation itself. The Greek words used are pagi is fountains, and that's Greek 4077. Is it pagi? I don't know what the actual pronunciation of that is. And then the waters is Greek 5204, as if rain waters. I saw that as a possibility. So we might be entering the time of the latter rain during that time. But anyway, here are two words that use both Greek words, or two verses that both use the Greek words we just mentioned. Revelation 7:17, for the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all their tears from their eyes. John 4:13, this is referring to Jesus speaking to the woman at the well, and how he knew everything about her life, and she was amazed by that. Who wouldn't be? Jesus answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up unto everlasting life. Now that's fountains of waters. There's the similar words are in there. The Greek 4077, pege, fountains, and Greek 5204, waters. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up unto everlasting life. So we have the language of salvation there. Now it's amazing, because when you see that in Revelation 14:17, this is the time of judgment. And it's saying with a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, for the hour, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made the heaven, the earth, and the sea, and the fountains of water. To me, that's like saying, and created salvation for humankind. Okay. So during the 1600 days, the following could come to pass. Now, if you study the language of in Revelation 14, number one, the first angel had the everlasting gospel to preach. That means the gospel's going out. This is very identical to Matthew 24. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached unto all the world as a witness unto the nations, and then the end will come. That's what Christ said. So the first angel had the everlasting gospel to preach. Number two, second angel declares the judgment on the fallen houses of God, or Babylon, relates to the second woe. I believe the second woe is speaking of judgment on the houses of God also. So this is very, very similar. When you have Babylon is fallen and has fallen, as Christ was addressing the houses of God, he was addressing the seven churches, which represented all the churches in the world. And each one, Thyatira, whoever he was addressing, he had certain things to say to each one of them. The third angel is judgment on those who worship the beast. So you have the everlasting gospel going out. You have the second angel declaring judgment on the houses of God, or fallen Babylon, which relates to the second woe. And then you have the third angel proclaiming judgment on those who worship the beast. Revelation 14:9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. I want to focus on the word beast, because it's an interesting breakdown when you see the root word. It seems to be more of a belief system and a full denial of the true and living God. It is, but it's headed up by Satan, obviously. I mean, that's his kingdom. There's kingdom shall war against kingdom. That's what it says in Matthew 24, and that's what's going on right now. It is the kingdom of Satan that has come to set a trap or a snare. Greek word is 2342, beast, therion. Diminutive from the same as Greek 2339, a dangerous animal, venomous wild beast. Okay, we're going to look at the Greek 2339 too, to see how that relates to trap. Revelation 17:8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Romans 11:6. Now this talks about the root word of therion. And I wanted to point this out because there's really a connection here with a trap. Romans 11:6. But if by grace, then it is no more of works. Otherwise grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is no more grace. Otherwise work is no more work. What then? Israel hath not obtained that which he seeketh for, but the election has obtained it, and the rest were blinded. According as it is written, God hath given them the spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear unto this day. Romans 11:9. And David said, let their table be made a snare and a trap. That's that thera. That's that, like therion. That's that word, Greek 2339. David said, let their table be made a snare and a trap, and a stumbling block and a recompense unto them. Let their eyes be darkened, that they may not see, and bow down their backs always. Romans 11:11. The Gentiles are grafted in. I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? God forbid. But rather through their fall salvation is come unto the Gentiles, to provoke them to jealousy. So that Greek word 2339, thera, as David has said, is a snare and a trap. So you can somewhat get an understanding of those who worship the beast. You know, it's an anti-God, it's an anti-Christ, really, when you think about everything that's going on. I point this all out because even during the hour of judgment, which seems like it's almost upon us, God is always magnified in judgment. He's always magnified when there's judgment. And that relates to the month of Adar. It relates to the book of Esther, where God is glorified. It relates to Joel 2. When Satan did great things, then God removes the northern, he removes Satan, and then God does great things. He is magnified. It all ties in. John 12:27. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this cause came I unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name. Then there came a voice from heaven saying, I have both glorified it, and I will glorify it again. The people therefore that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said, an angel spake to him. And I've always wondered if that verse there is related to the seven thunders. John got this. It was like, okay, you heard something here, but don't write it down. Don't write it down with the seven voices thundered. And it's always like, man, what was that? But maybe it relates to the time that God is glorified. What it said here was, the people that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said an angel spake to him. Jesus answered and said, this voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. Aha! So we have this time frame where God is about to be magnified and the prince of this world to be cast out. The judgment is come. So we have two time frames almost identical in what happens. Satan was defeated, he was cast out, and then at the end God removes the northern. He removes him, and then God is glorified. And then God does great things. here Christ is praying, Father, glorify thy name. And the reply was, I have both glorified it and I will glorify it again. Well, is this again at the end of time? It's very possible. So now is the judgment of this world, now shall the prince of this world be cast out, and I, if I be lifted up from the earth and draw all men unto me. Then he said, signifying what death, that he would die. So this magnification does relate to Joel 2. We've covered that in a few studies, and when God does great things and he says, fear not, O land, and it's just it seems like a really positive thing, a great reversal that happens. So that's it for this study. We're looking at the 1335 days of Daniel 12 and how that relates to the coming year 2022 to 2026, trumpets to Pentecost. We've also looked at the 1600 furlongs. Did I forget the verses in Revelation, or did I mention them? I will put those up. I'm totally sorry about that. Yeah, where the I didn't write. I just mentioned 1, 2, 3. I basically recapped, but I didn't mention the horses' bridles and all that. So I will end with that. I'll put the whole thing up so you can read that, because it's definitely language of judgment. But like I say, when God is magnified, salvation is there too, as we've seen with Christ's prayer. So we have this balance going on. We have this balance, and it's so significant if we're 12 months out from that. I mean, that is just incredible to think about, how that timeline of 1335 days and even the 1600 days could possibly start in 2022. Praise God if it does. I mean, it's like, okay, this is time. So we'll look at other years that we can possibly eliminate, and which will shift the focus more again to 2022 to 2026. This is an incredible study, and as I said earlier, man, this is a time to cry out to God for salvation, because time goes by fast. Time goes by really fast. And if you're thinking about it now in this study, shut it off and pray to God, because He is a very merciful God, and salvation is the greatest thing anybody can inherit, because it grants them forgiveness of sins and eternal life through the work of Christ by the Spirit of God saving somebody. So, if you start praying, don't give up until you have confidence. Read the Bible. Read the Bible daily. Get into it. Read the Gospels. Read the whole activity that went on during Christ's ministry. I think a lot of that same stuff is going to happen during this time. And, for people who are saying salvation is over, that's nonsense. Joel 2, before the day of the Lord, it says, whosoever shall cry out shall be saved. And I'll put that up, because that's an important aspect of the very final day, salvation to the last day. My name is Marty Catuzzo. The email is 2011studies@gmail.com, 2011studies@gmail.com, and shoot me an email if you have any questions. Comment below. The more comments you guys post, the more circulation these videos get. If you want to share the videos, please do. The more circulation, that will really help to get this message out there. Throughout this whole next 12 months, let's agree to do that. Get the video shared so more people can hear it, because it probably will come to a surprise to a lot of people what's going to happen. But if there are certain people that know here and there and everywhere, then they'll be able to explain, this is what the Bible spoke about. Look at this video over here. It was said a year ahead of time, because God reveals things through His Word as we study Him. 2011studies@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and until the next study, God bless you.